when you cut the mozzarella curd, what you're trying to do is to have pieces that are not so large that it takes so much time to warm them up that you release a lot of butter fat, but at the same time, you don't want them so small that there's so much surface area releasing all the flavor as well. So the perfect size would be about a 1 inch by 1 inch square. You can see that. And I'm going to sacrifice this, and everyone can touch it, and we will, it's like an ice-breaking exercise for a corporate convention.
But
everyone
can we taste it?
We can. In fact, I have enough here that I'll actually, once you feel that, pass it around, I'll go break out a bunch of this, and you can taste what it's like.
So how different does it taste from the finished?
Excellent, Carol. Excellent question.
Hey,
we're going to go there.
I'm a foodie.
I love it. You're not going to want a very large piece to taste, I promise.
Oh, really?
What coagulant do they use?
In this, it's citric acid. So as opposed to an enzyme like we talked about, an animal enzyme, this is going to be a citric acid rennet. You can also at home, there's a lot of home remedies for goat's milk, mozzarella, and cow's milk, where they incorporate the microwave in citric acid, either straight from a citrus fruit or in powder form. You can do that. So we're just taking slices here of the curd, the same way you could buy it here if you wanted to buy a pound of curd to make it. Our balls are about 1/3 to 1/2 pound. You'd be looking at about that much curd that you'd buy from us if you want to take some home and make it yourself. It's 2 to 3 balls, 3 1/3-pound balls. For foodborne illnesses, it's imperative as far as the sterilization of the cutting board, your hands, the cutting surfaces. You are bringing just under boiling water, sometimes in this case boiling water, into the product. So you are going to kill off some bacteria. And there are certain bacterial cultures, healthy bacterial cultures, that are already on the curd itself. But you wouldn't want to do this where raw fish, poultry, meat is also being produced. You'd want to do this in a separate space altogether. If anyone's taken a tour or been to a cheese-making facility, they're wearing hats, booties, everything is sterile. A lot of stainless steel surfaces are always spotless. And that is because they're trying to control the exact strains of whether it be penicillin on a light, gloomy rinded cheese and or bacteria that they want to grow on the cheese. And they can do that through complete sterilization of the facility. In this process, because we're going from this environment into a clean receptacle that has water and we're cutting off the air or the ability for bacteria through oxidation to grow on the surface of the product, it's a fairly clean and time-tested way of doing it. There's 2 reasons why we don't use plastic gloves here, and we're always happy to use plastic gloves, but because we have constant bleach buckets and our surfaces are clean, you can't feel the texture of things with plastic gloves on. So whether it's a deli meat or it's a cheese, we have no way of knowing if that product is out of date or if there's something amiss about it. For instance, if I was to feel this and I could feel that there was mold growth on the outside, I would change that. With plastic gloves, you wouldn't know that. And also because you're working with very hot water, if anyone's had plastic gloves on working with hot things, whether it be grilling and or putting your hands in hot water in the sink, it keeps the heat on your skin surface. And so I don't like to burn myself. There's one more real reason for that. As you stretch, the mazzatura process of elongating with the heat, what happens is butterfats come to the surface and it gets very slick. With plastic gloves on, you have to actually grab a hold of the curd and pull it. And by grabbing a hold of the curd in the stretching process, as opposed to just letting gravity elongate the proteins, you're pulling out more butterfats with plastic gloves than you would if you just use the texture of the mantle. And then we're going to add pre-drawn tap water here, just the highest amount of, the highest heat. I don't know what your thermostats are set at home. Hot tap water is about 70 to 100 degrees traditionally, and that's where you want to start with your curd. Your curd should be close to room temperature. You never want to put the water directly on the curd. You want to pour it around the bowl, basically just slowly adding that water and slowly bringing it up to temperature. We're going to take, once I get this curd cut, and once it warms up and softens up, we're going to then discard that water gently, and we're going to bring in hotter water. And so we're just slowly bringing up the temperature to just under boiling. That'll be next. What that water is going to do is allow us to form and stretch, and that'll be the final time we add water. It's a Victorinox Swiss knife, essentially. What it's made for is to take down an eighth of the wheel of Swiss. Swiss cheese comes at the largest wheel made. It's about a 200, 220 pound wheel. And what this is, once you get the wheel in half and then in quarters and in eighths, you have the nose of the cheese, and this is for taking off a clean nose piece. So it's a specific knife that I have, I'm sorry, Swiss cheese delegates. I've converted it. You could use any knife you have at home. The reason I use this one is because it gives me clean, long slices that are more uniform. Sleeve or serrated knife, I wouldn't suggest tearing it. That just gives too many uneven surfaces to work with. The size of the mozzarella ball you make is really dependent on your hand size, how much you can hold at one time and roll up and fit through, and I'll show you what I mean by that when we get there. But don't feel bad if you don't have perfect half-pound mozzarella balls. So all we're doing is bringing in about 80 degree at this point, 90 degree water. And you're going to see the solution turn into a lightly cloudy slurry. And what's being released there is just some of the butter fats on the surface of the curd. I never do this. We get our curd and we have about a week to use it, and that's a good point. You will find cheeses, young cheeses, whether they be soft cheeses from our case or young deli cheeses. Anytime, let's say you pull a chunk of cheddar out of your refrigerator and you touch it with a finger that has had some sort of bacteria on it, you'll get literally a fingerprint of mold on your cheese. The same way with curd, the same way with anything. Now that doesn't mean it should go right in the trash. You can simply remove that surface layer and start over. But that's a point where we don't use our hands a lot. We don't want to transfer molds from one type of mold to another on a cheese. So you'll see us use a lot of, all the way from Sparta, Michigan, the famous patty paper. Does anyone know that patty paper was made originally in Sparta, Michigan? You know where Sparta is? Over by Grand Rapids, Apple Country. Fast fact, the patty paper world. But the goal there clearly is not to transfer bacteria, mold from and to. And you can see that a good cheese eye can see when something's been mishandled. If you see a fingerprint in a cheese that you're going to buy, you may ask them to clean that off. It's clearly that they've been handling multiple cheeses and they've actually by no means contaminated or ruined the cheese. They've simply crossed. So the coolness of the curd has brought down the water temperature a bit. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add my boiling water to this slowly to increase it a little more. And then we're going to do our first pour off. And I'll pull a piece of curd out here once it softens up so you can see what it's like before you add the hot water. And what we're trying to do is we're trying to get that temperature 70 to 90 degrees to permeate all the way through the curd structure. And a good way to test that, if you're working with larger curd or if you're unsure, is just to break one open after it's sat for a little bit and it's been able to be in the warm water. Find your largest piece of curd and crack it open and feel the center. And if it's warmed through, then you're ready to bring it to the next level. Now, I'm sorry everyone can't see exactly what I speak of, but what you have here is you have a light beating of almost golden colored butter fats on top. And so the goal of this process, and what any mozzarella maker is trying to do, is to keep as many butter fats in the curd as possible. And the way to test that is when you're done, you're always going to have a slight surface of golden colored butter fat, but the more there is, the less there's going to be inside. So you know batch to batch how it is. And that can be affected by a couple things. Anyone who's not used to working with curd a lot, it changes, the acidity level of the curd changes over time. As it ages, the pH goes up. And so it actually breaks down faster, and you don't need as high heat. You can actually use a lower heat to stretch the curd. When the curd is very fresh, you need a little higher heat to soften it up. The acidity level is a little lower. Right. So now you have evenly warmed curd in the bowl. We're going to remove the water, but we're not going to remove all the water. We're going to leave just enough so you have little icebergs poking up, curd icebergs. And the reason we do that is because you don't want all the gravity of the curd to sit on itself, releasing butter fats. You don't want to drain all the water. Leave just enough in so it supports it in the solution. So there is how much I'm going to drain out. And it's just so it stays in. I have ambient tap water, not too cold, about 50 to 60, 70 degrees right in there. And I'm going to add just a little bit of this whey to that water. And the reason I'm going to do that is because when I place the mozzarella balls into this, I don't want the butterfat to leach into the solution through osmosis. I want to hopefully keep as much of the butterfat in there as possible. The reason when you buy other brands that are made, Sarah makes some mozzarella that you can buy in the stores, they'll put on the label a little bit of salt in there. Same idea there. One is for flavor, the other is to keep butterfats in the ball.